Hi, everyone. Really nice to be here and super excited, as Alex said, such a great panel today. We're going to kick it off with just a round of intros. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, each of the panelists. So, Sam, do you want to start?
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Sam Duboff, New York based. I work at Spotify. I'm head of marketing and policy for the music business, and my team includes product marketing. I started my career in product marketing at Twitter for a while, and then at Medium before I went to Spotify. Been at Spotify for about 6 years now. So started in just product marketing and now kind of broader marketing and policy role. Excited to talk with you all.
Awesome. Thank you. Christiana?
Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Christiana Franson. I currently lead product marketing for Dropbox. Prior to Dropbox, I spent a number of years at Okta, leading a large portion of their product marketing team, including platform and solutions. And prior to that, I was at Front and then WeWork, and have been at a mix of small and large companies, and enough stints in full stack marketing to be dangerous and hopefully better at my PMM role. And I'm based out of Boulder, Colorado.
Awesome. Great to have you here. And lastly, Dave.
Thanks, Jasmine. Hey, everyone. Dave Esber. I lead one of the product marketing teams at Twilio. I'm based in San Francisco, and I made a career pivot, actually, from higher education and ended up at Twilio. I worked in campaigns, growth operations before moving into product marketing, where I've gone from an IC to leading a team. So, Twilio has been really where I started my tech career, but made that pivot. So excited to have this conversation in particular.
Yeah, that's awesome. Love the career pivot. Speaking of, I'll introduce myself. So I'm Jasmine. I used to be the director of product marketing at Intercom. I also career pivoted and am now a career and leadership coach for product marketers. So helping people get the most out of their careers. As Alex said, we'll cover a few pre-selected questions first, and then we'll get into the audience questions. So excited to dive right in. The first question, pretty broad, but like, what have been the biggest accelerators of your career? Like, what has really helped you drive that career growth? Christiana, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. I would say for me, it's been two main factors. The first, especially early on, but I think it's been consistent even in leadership roles, is like the ability to execute and being really reliable and consistent in how you execute. I found early on that if I was dependable and the quality and reliability of what I delivered was there, then my scope would just naturally increase, just because, and especially in terms of like things that were more broadly visible and important to the business, because they knew that they could count on you. So I would say that's the first one. And the second one, which is an obvious one for all PMMs, I think is just the ability to build, nurture relationships. We are in a very cross-functional role. We've got a ton of internal stakeholders. So the ability to build, I think, a human-to-human relationship that then allows you to have those internal customers, and then of course our external customers be top of mind in the way that you operate, the way that you drive advocacy and build support, get things approved and validated, I think is so critical to success.
Yeah, love that. I think the relationship building is often kind of overlooked by some of the like more hard skills, but it's so key. Sam, how about you?
Yeah, I think the two things that come to mind for me, the first is just kind of sticking with the right managers who you can grow with. I think for a lot of like PMM starting out who feel kind of like a ceiling of career growth, one of the most common things I hear will be like a manager they don't quite click with, or a manager who isn't kind of bringing them up along with them. And obviously it isn't always an easy decision of changing your role, applying for a new job, those sorts of things, but that's usually like the hardest thing to overcome. And for me, yeah, like the biggest career jump I made was following a manager from my job at Twitter to Medium, and really just connecting with her. When she got a big new job, she brought me with her, and I got to grow really fast there. So I'd say like most important factor of any job really is kind of that manager, and are they going to help you grow, and are your incentives and career growth aligned? Second, kind of trend I've noticed of PMMs who grow the fastest is those who take a really expansive definition of what product marketing means. You always get the "what is product marketing" question every cocktail party I'm at when I would say my job as product marketer, let alone internally from executives when they want to understand what your team's doing. And rather than focusing on kind of a stock answer of what PMM is, I think the PMMs who do the best just kind of like ignore formal roles and responsibility. And the PMM title gives you a pretty broad remit to be a commercial business strategist, a sales marketer, a product manager, a product designer sometimes, UX writing sometimes, a full stack marketer when you're launching things. And usually the PMMs who grow fastest just like kind of fill any organizational vacuum that has to do with business growth and product adoption. And you start doing stuff and then people just know PMM are folks who get important stuff done for the business. And so, yeah, just taking a really kind of expansive view of what you're allowed to do in your role is usually the thing that kind of helps you continue to build that portfolio.
Yeah, that seems so key, just the finding ways to add value, even if it's not like specifically what you might consider as PMM typically.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, how about you, Dave?
Well, I was just going to add, if you haven't gotten in trouble for pushing the boundaries of the role too hard, you probably are pushing hard enough. I think we've all been there. I absolutely agree. Like one of the things for me is the mentorship, and not just in terms of my manager, but also peer mentors. I had such a great network of folks early on who continue to be really good sounding boards. And so having those people that are pushing you, you can kind of push each other, but also bounce ideas off of, is so important. And that's definitely harder being a solo PMM, but finding those outside of the organization is just so helpful as you kind of grow. And I think the other piece is, yes, you have to prove your ability to deliver, but also ask for more. So especially as companies go through growth stages or you see a vacuum, just saying like, hey, I'd love to try that out, or I want to take on that opportunity, or just doing it is such a good way of being seen as that expert across the company. And so it's just always being willing to seek those opportunities when they come up.
Totally. I'm hearing the theme from you all about like getting stuff done, finding things to do, kind of taking control and ownership of what you work on. A thing I see a lot from PMMs is like how to plan out their career, because I think Sam, as you touched on, like PMM's kind of different everywhere, and so knowing what type of work you want to do can be a challenge. And so I'm curious, like what objectives you set yourself to help develop your PMM career. Like, did you know where you were going? Did you just take some as it came? Maybe Dave, we can start with you because I'm particularly curious given your pivot into the PMM career.
Yeah, it's probably an equal mix, dumb luck and just like a willingness to try on new things. I don't think I knew what product marketing was. I think many of us don't know what product marketing is when we join. And so many of the best product marketers I've seen have backgrounds as solutions engineers or campaign managers, or know the marketing stack backwards and forwards. But it's like that, real willingness to understand the customer, want to tell stories, understand the data. Like all of that is just so helpful. I knew I liked to tell stories, and I think that got me in trouble as a child, but professionally, it was a huge benefit and asset to my career. And so as I came to understand the role and understand, look, I can learn more about the customers, I can learn more about the roadmap, and then turn those into a story that drives action. Like that was what really got me excited about it. And so it took me from kind of being in a campaigns role where I didn't have access to the roadmap, I didn't have access to the customers, I was just doing it for someone else, I was operationalizing it, to realizing that there was this whole world of product marketing. And from there, it kind of just was the natural fit. And I was lucky to have a VP who saw that. But yeah, it was just that natural tendency toward storytelling and being really passionate about understanding people.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think that's a common trait among PMMs. Christiana, how about you? Did you have a sort of career map or objectives?
I think early on I was just like hungry, like grow as quick as possible. But I think the evolution from there, because I think that's like maybe a goal, but it's hard to like map succinctly to that. So what I found as the kind of intermediate places to get to grow was, okay, how do I become like I think as like a substitute seller, depending on where you spike, is like understand where you spike. And I always spiked, I think, more on the like solutions and outbound PMM side. So I thought to myself, okay, how do I become just as good as a seller and being able to communicate to customers, maybe convey the roadmap, to understand pain and like conduct a discovery calls. Like if I can just like be killer at that, then I think I will be able not only to be great at my job, but to be in demand in such a way and to like be ahead of where we need to go to then be valuable. And I think the other side, if you spike more on the product side, is to say, okay, how do you maybe like become, like a PM in some of the ways that you think in terms of like obviously pushing PMs and understanding the market opportunity and thinking through a business case. Because I think those lines are blurry and depending on the organization, like I think like the handoffs vary. So so some of the intermediate goals I made was just like how to just become like indispensable to like my major stakeholders by basically being like as good as they are at their jobs.
I love that. I feel like be indispensable is like something you put on your wall in front of your laptop. How about you, Sam?
Yeah, I had some notes jotted down before this, and I basically wrote down the exact same thing, which was like first 3 months in any PMM role, like the goals, like understand the product as well as the PM, understand the business as well as the finance team. And yeah, I think sales is a great example too. Because yeah, the risk with PMM always is, because you don't always have a clear organizational mandate, you could own nothing or you can kind of own everything. And how do you find that in between? And the best starting point is being someone who can flex to all sides of the role with that level of authority and expertise. The only other kind of like onboarding goal I always have and think new PMMs benefit from is like the lowest hanging fruit that everyone agrees PMM owns is kind of go-to-market launches. And if your first few months you can find one you can just like overinvest your time in and knock out of the park, that sets you up well because that's been the kind of one area where I've always seen everyone gets PMM owns it, everyone sees the value in it, and it's an easy kind of like quick way to stand out and start to build your momentum internally.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like, especially when you're starting out in your PMM career, there's so much value in just like doing different things and trying out, to your point, Christiana, figuring out where you spike. Like as you go on in your career, figuring out, what do I actually really enjoy and what am I really good at? And then you can kind of focus in on those type of PMM roles. But early on, like just taking on whatever is great.
Well, and I think just to piggyback quickly off Sam, is just, I think finding that like flagship project or initiative that like in a certain amount of time, and sorry, Dave, you were going to say this, but I find that that's important no matter the level. I know that like, I've been at Dropbox 4-ish months and I'm like, okay, what is going to be like the thing that like is a quick way to show that like, I'm going to like, do a great job here.
Yeah, totally. Dave, were you going to jump in?
No, but that's always been, I think the biggest challenge a lot of us have is building trust with product early on, especially coming into an organization where, maybe someone is less passionate about their PMM partnership. And so often that quick go-to-market launch where the product 95% as well as the person who built it, and certainly better than the majority of the company, like that's such an easy way to build trust. And then from there, it lets you get deeper into strategy and business case and roadmap planning, and you get brought into sales calls and QBRs, and all of that just really helps to kind of develop that reputation. So I echo that sentiment.
Yeah, that credibility is so useful and so valuable as you build that relationship. So thinking about like further down the road, I've heard from a lot of PMMs that there's a point where it feels like growth slows down in your career. You like maybe early on get promoted a lot or expand your responsibilities, and then as you get more senior, it can feel slower. So how do you think about mapping that next step when you've kind of reached that level of maybe a plateau or feeling like it's slower? Does anyone want to jump in first?
I'm happy to, if I may.
Go ahead.
I would say, I get that. I also think that's natural that it slows down the more senior you get. Like, we can't all be CEO in 5 years. So, I think whether you're in PMM or any other discipline, marketing or otherwise, I think that that's completely natural. So I would just like give yourself a little grace if you are being like, hey, it's been 2 years and I haven't been promoted. And then I think that's, the next question I would ask is, What era are you in your career, you know, to use a Taylor Swift term? Like, and how are we defining growth? Like, I think, sure, I think we anchor on titles or spans of control because that's the most measurable way. But I also think that there's a width dimension here too, like what other initiatives or projects or even like sub-disciplines in PMM, or there's some questions around like, hey, B2B, B2C, routes to market. I just think there's a number of other dimensions that round you out as a leader or as a professional more broadly. So I would just ask yourself, whether it's complexity, but I think there's a number of other dimensions and set of experiences, because ultimately when you get hired or promoted into a bigger role, it's because you've seen and experienced certain things that are maybe not shown in just a title change. So I would just encourage folks to seek like a certain breadth maybe or depth of experiences that then makes you compelling for, different roles.
Yeah, that's so true. Like what does growth actually mean? Like title is just one piece. And as you said, it's easy to focus on that because you can see it. But there's so many other ways to think about growth as well. Sam, how have you thought about it for your career?
Yeah, I think when you're lucky, you have people senior to you who are looking out for you, but you can never count on that. So you've got to kind of look out for yourself and advocate for yourself and carve out your own opportunities. And so, I think you could think about it in terms of growing vertically within your role or kind of expanding horizontally into adjacent parts of your company. And so for the vertical side, I think it was a lot easier to grow in a different time in the economy when tech companies were growing so fast. And if you're doing a good job, headcount would open up and you'd hire a bunch of people and, get to grow as a leader. That's, not what tech is right now. And so I think it's extra important to try to align yourself to the priority growing parts of a business. Growing as a PMM can be tough when you're on kind of a core, more mature business, especially now. And so if you have opportunities when you're starting to feel that ceiling to switch to something where there's a lot of growth and investment in the company, that's where you want to be. And then to grow horizontally, especially in this environment where a lot of companies are cutting down incremental headcount. And, in 3 years ago in tech, someone might have, an exec would look at, some part of the business and hire a team to go do it. That doesn't happen now. And you should look for those kind of vacuums in organizational responsibility. And, where appropriate, you just start doing it. That's worked for me. I've seen it work for lots of folks at all the companies I've been at, where someone just starts doing a thing the company needs, and then they're seen as the person who can do that, and your role expands, and at some point you get to hire out for it. So those would be like the two ways to think about it.
Yeah, totally creating your own role and domain as you want to expand it out. How do you think about it, Dave?
When I start feeling like I'm plateauing, or when I've seen people go through those, it's like a really great moment to do a values assessment on like, what do I actually care about? What aligns with my passions, my interests, my motivations? And I think, as we were going through that massive tech like hype cycle, that passion or that values alignment was getting that next role. And so, when things are a little bit more stable, it's, what really is my motivating? Is it delivering value to the business? Is it value to myself? Is it security in role so I can focus on my family? Like, what are those things that are actual motivators? And actually getting really clear on that helps, I think, make the decision of, do I want to stay and grow in place? Do I want to pursue something different? Do I want to go start at a smaller company? And it just gives so much like clarity, I think, to role and like what I actually want out of next, other than like moving into that next role. I think that's a really great place to also spend time with manager, and hopefully like that's a person you trust or a mentor, and being able to talk through, like, if I want to stay in place and grow, what are the skill sets I want to work on? What are the kind of orthogonal projects? What are the big rocks that I can show that I'm continuing to grow and develop in place? And like having that agreement with management is sometimes the way to find those rare promotions or that rare growth, if that's the right place to grow and line. So I've found that like talking through those values with folks externally, my mentor, has always been a really good thing when I'm feeling a little stuck or burnt out in the role.
Yeah, as a coach, big fan of doing values work. It's one of my favorite things to do with clients. And as you say, it's so helpful for kind of like taking a step back and being like, okay, do I actually want to grow here? Like, do I want to try a different type of company, like different type of role? And yeah, really figuring out what's important to you, which may be like work specific things, but as you said, other life things as well that play a part. And to Sam's point earlier, that having a manager who can really help you identify some of those things. I remember early in my career having someone tell me like, oh, you're like a really great leader. And I was like, that's not something I would have used to describe myself, but having someone else kind of identify what you're good at, especially early on when you're maybe less clear, is so valuable. Okay, so the next question, very related, is around like, what are the skills you need to get to that level of director, director of product marketing, a goal for lots of PMMs, I'm sure. Sam, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think I forget if it was Dave or Christiana kind of talked about the kind of interpersonal cross-functional side of product marketing earlier. So definitely kind of plus one that the more senior you get, the more of your role is about building good relationships with other teams, setting up good working dynamics, helping to compromise, see the trade-offs and bigger picture. I think more like tactically speaking, it's all about kind of that switch from uh, kind of stepping into assignments given to you to being generative and creating those opportunities and strategy yourself. And the more you can demonstrate an ability to do that, the better. I think for junior PMMs, a lot of the role is and should be kind of company leaders or PMs kind of coming up with product strategies that then you're, supporting and helping to, set up for success. And that's great. The more senior you get, the more you're wanting to resolve things yourself without needing to send it up the chain, the more you're creating kind of platforms for product adoption and helping to connect the dots between different parts of the company and seeing an opportunity to connect it narratively or to bundle things into a moment to create a flagship marketing platform where you can launch all these things at once. It's kind of that switch from thinking there's a roadmap that's going to be handed to you that you can help execute to generating and resolving and kind of creating things yourself. That's probably like the number one kind of toughest kind of chasm to jump.
Yeah, like being proactive rather than just reactive to what's handed to you. Yeah, makes sense. Christiana?
Yeah, I echo a lot of what Sam said. I do think it's one of the hardest transitions to make, I think, to director. And for the sake of my answer, I will I see director as like a management role, right? Versus maybe an IC role. I know there's IC at that level, but given that it's a people management job, I think the main some of the main levers for that is like the differences between director and whatever is right below at your company is really around scope and complexity. And so maybe on the scope side, I think it's the ability, I know I keep going back to execution. I just think it can't be emphasized enough so that if you've shown an ability to manage greater scope and to do that well, then I think that is one. The second is like a refinement of craft, I think, within that scope. So you show that you've got the like expertise and aptitude to not only deliver things that you own, but also to, I think, manage others, whether directly to deliver at that level. Some of the other, I have up like how we think about it at Dropbox. I think one is like around, I think understanding strategy and change management. So like being able to like have decisions that are rooted in the business or in the market and to be able to collaborate with other leaders to push things forward that I think are greater than PMM for me is one trigger here. And then being able to manage the change around something like that, especially when it's cross-functional. And then on the complexity side, I think being able to show agility and obviously the communication style that allows for these things to for some of these bigger initiatives or thornier initiatives to, progress in such a way that move the company forward. I think once you reach a director level, one of the things that we look at Dropbox is really company-wide impact rather than just functional impact. And so I think being able to connect yourselves to those initiatives and to be able to do so with grace and, you know, and with agility is super important.
Yeah, totally. They're like getting out of just your like lane, essentially. How about you, Dave?
It's funny, that was the like number one thing that rose to the top of my list, and I agree with so much of what Sam and Christiana shared. The ability to look up and around is just so important. Like, yes, we have that thing that we're working on, and we'll chase it down, or block for our team, or chase it down on behalf of our team. But understanding the broader context, especially at larger organizations, of the 50 other things, their own OKRs, their priorities, and kind of being able to contextualize all of that, and also to have the communication skills and the clarity of vision so I can influence others or influence my team as part of that vision is so important. So like, it's so easy to get stuck in our space because that's what you did as an IC. Like, you owned that thing, and now suddenly you have to own many things and context switch, but also have a better appreciation of what's going on around you. So that's the only thing I'll add.
Yeah, a good advice I was given by a manager once was that when you're like more senior, your team becomes the other leaders around you rather than just like the people you manage. And it's like a great way of thinking about stepping back and thinking about who you're actually working with and collaborating. We've got a ton of audience questions, so we're going to do one more and then we'll go over to those. So everyone, please upvote the questions you want us to answer most, and we'll see how many we can get through. But before that, quick one about who has been most influential in your career. Like, do you have mentors and personal board of directors, coaches? Dave, you mentioned a mentor earlier, so maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, there was a group of folks that I started my product marketing career with, and they're still the people that I regularly vet ideas and talk to, and we have kind of ongoing conversations. I think the other thing is I've found a lot of success working with a coach, and I think that's something, especially as folks advance in career, like reaching out, finding a coach who specializes in kind of the way that you like to get information or be challenged is really helpful in just better understanding yourself and how to operate in a corporate setting.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam?
Yeah, my answer's probably more boring, but my first manager out of undergrad was very much I was working at Pepsi in brand marketing, so a really different type of thing. And yeah, he was just a really great mentor, helped me understand marketing, become a better marketer. And then he was the one who kind of identified tech marketing as an interesting space for me, and then created the opportunities for me to get to do it at Pepsi, which wasn't really a conventional setup. And so, yeah, I just got really lucky there, to say the least.
Yeah, that's also, I mean, yeah, if you're lucky enough to find a really good manager, they can be like a coach and a mentor as well for you. How about you, Christiana?
I think for me, some of the mentors I look to are cross-functional leaders. So I know for sure, I think other marketing leaders as well. But the folks that have been most impactful to me in most recent years are just, I think, either field-facing leaders or product-facing leaders that can really help, I think, contextualize things at a leadership level, both in terms of like dynamics between groups, how to work with C-level folks, and or just like business acumen and understanding the stage of the company and what makes sense in order to accelerate growth. And so some of these, I think, macro questions. And then I think Dave mentioned it earlier, but I think my peers across companies have been the ongoing source of support and growth as well. So super lucky to have worked with some amazing, amazing folks.
Yeah, it's always so helpful to have a community of people who, even if it's just like, yes, we've had this problem too, or, you know, get ideas of how to solve things. So helpful.
Or commiserate, depending on the favorite, right? So, but yeah, I think it's helpful for sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we'll look at the audience questions. So it looks like our top one is, what's a framework you use to tell compelling yet succinct stories? Does anyone want to jump in first? Sam, please.
one little thing I've always done in my career is just like when you're starting to think about a campaign, launch, go to market, whatever it is, and you're trying to figure out that story, uh, like start, I kind of like make a spectrum from like most safe to most risky of like how we could position it, what I'd want the external headline to be. And then I start writing out 8 or 10 of them, and usually from the repetition of trying it, you kind of like unlock a nugget. And then when you kind of push yourself to do the riskier ones, often they're less risky than you think. It just kind of unlocks the part of your brain that kind of knows where the answer is. But like usually it's like, the most complicated parts of the launch are what you end up ignoring and you get the simpler answer. So that's how I always start, and then you kind of work back from there. But um, useful tip you can try out.
Yeah, I love that. Like pushing beyond what you're comfortable with, and then you might go kind of further than you would have otherwise. Yeah. How about you, Dave?
I love that tip, and I probably will use it next time. I think I mean, there are so many different ways we have to make stories come to life, but kind of remembering at its core, it's like, what's the problem? What's the solution? What's the reason to believe is the most basic way to think about any story. And that makes you think about who the audience is, what the pain is, what they had to do before, how you're uniquely solving it, so your value propositions, and then proving it to them. Because we're all skeptical, especially when it comes to marketing, is like the most basic way. But there are so many examples of really great storytelling approaches, whether it's seeking nirvana or the challenger method. And so it's like pick the one that works best for you and then just follow that, because then you have a blueprint moving forward, which makes that repetition so much easier.
Yeah, yeah. And good reminder that there's no one perfect way of doing things. What do you use, Christiana?
Like Dave took the words out of my mouth. So plus one to that, I think and a double down on the point around differentiation. I can't emphasize enough how important that is to make something truly compelling, is to have it be differentiated. I think the only thing I would add is like, and it's kind of in the spirit of what Sam said, is just like make it like a little bit edgy. And it's a little bit in the challenger sale, which is like, hey, what's new or different or unique about that perspective that teaches somebody something? I think if we sometimes I think about like, what can I teach or push that prospect or buyer on? And that usually kind of gets me to a place that like is just beyond some of the buzzwords that I think sometimes find themselves in messaging.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the focus of like the one thing, we always used to use like, what is the one thing I want them to remember from this, if nothing else, because they're not going to remember your like 5,000 features. Very helpful to focus in. Thank you all. Okay, the next question is related to our discussion about like PMM being different everywhere. Which type of PMM have you seen succeed more in your career and network? Full stack generalist PMMs or specialist PMMs? Christiana, do you want to kick us off?
My answer is a little annoying, which is like, it depends. I think it depends on a few things, which is like, depends, be successful where. So I think if you want to be at a larger, maybe public company that has more, like, I think disciplines, I think going deep is helpful, because then you've got, I think, a level of craft that makes you super competitive and you can plug a hole. And then I also think that depth matters for more technical products, because I think if you want to be in dev tools, for example, security, and that's where I recently came from, I think depth matters there. Now, if you love earlier stage companies, even late stage companies, then I think a generalist is helpful, because then there are fewer of you and you want somebody who I think has the breadth. But I still don't think that that you still need to have, I think, certain places you spike, and that story very much matters for when you interview. I think just walking in as a generalist is not differentiating, going back to like messaging. So yeah, it depends.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. Like where is really important, and that no one's gonna be like amazing at every single part of PMM, or if they are, I'd love to meet you. So knowing, where you spike, as you say. Sam, what have you seen?
Yeah, definitely it depends. I've always had a bias towards generalist. I started my career in CPG, as I mentioned, at Pepsi and Starbucks, and I always laugh with product marketing even as a title, because when you're at Pepsi and Starbucks, you're kind of quote unquote called a brand manager. But what you're managing a product. It's, I was on Pepsi Max, which was a 0-calorie kind of like, Diet Pepsi alternative. And yeah, you were trying to grow this product and understand the product and what kind of audiences wanted to drink it and what their other options were and how could we get them to try it at a baseball game and then buy it at the grocery store. And then when you go to tech, what are you marketing in tech if not the product? And so product marketer is almost a redundant title and function a lot. And so given that, I think a generalist marketing approach where you're there to quarterback so many of the kind of other marketing go-to-market teams, that the broader your toolkit, the better. I think, yeah, definitely where being a specialist can help is when it comes to industry specialty, sector specialty, sometimes B2B versus B2C, like, for us at Spotify or when I was at Twitter and Medium, we're often looking for people who've worked at other creator platforms or have worked in media tech before. And so, yeah, when you have a passion like that, that helps. And then a generalist toolkit, I think, is always great to work on.
Yeah, there's different lenses on what specialist means, I guess, like a specialist in what. How about you, Dave?
In addition to everything that was shared, I think it's also the like disposition of the company and that current leadership. So like PLG being the buzzword, like, okay, that means I'm going to go hug product. And I think just seeing, leaders over the years at different companies, they either are like, I'm going to go hug my sales friend or I'm going to hug my product friend. And then you have some people that kind of fluctuate in between, but kind of getting a sense of where the business's priorities are, that kind of helps to align with that skill set. And I think, some of the best product marketers are just people who are hungry and, willing to learn new skills and want to kind of figure that out. So maybe I haven't gone super deep, but I get that the business needs me to go align with product, and that's what I'm excited about. And so when I'm talking to candidates, so often like that's the thing that I'm excited by, is that like, motivation to learn and grow in that role. But yeah, I think it annoying answer too. It depends on whether you gravitate toward a smaller or larger company, one with a bigger sales team or a smaller sales team. And then you have the human aspect of what that particular leader thinks that is the most important thing too.
Yeah, that alignment is so important, but it depends being the headline. Okay, our next one is how do you manage expectations and show strategic impact as a sole PMM at an IC director level in a company where the PMM function has historically not been successful or well understood or short-lived, in brackets, i.e. very CEO driven. I think lots of us have had this experience. Anyone want to jump in first with those? I'll pick on you, Christiana.
I was ready. The last two
Okay.
companies I've worked at, granted they're larger, but were founder CEO driven. So I can understand this. Although I think it's hard when you're solo. So I feel you out there. I would say two maybe main tactics I would pursue. One is like find friends in high places. So whether it's the leader, like I think sometimes these founder CEOs are product oriented. So it's likely that leader. And I think get close to that leader and his or her directs so that you can tie your value very closely to a value that's close to the CEO's heart. Or if the CEO's on the like sales side, then you maybe go there. But I think that's a tactic number one, which is like be friends with like the number twos to the degree you can build those relationships. The second is like, I think tie yourself to metrics that matter. And make it really clear how you supported those metrics. So whether it's revenue or retention, or some sort of conversion metric, like how do you just get as close as you can to that heartbeat, and make sure that the value of your work is reflected in that. And that's why I think it's like kind of a 1-2 punch, because then I think the like cross-functional support and folks that advocate for you and say, yeah, he or she did, like without them, we couldn't have done this, I think is like a really good, like 1-2 punch approach to kind of building kind of the confidence in PMM, which I know can be really tough. Yeah,
that measurement piece is so tricky sometimes as a PMM, but as you said, like if you can prove it, then it's easy. It's easy to say here's what I did and here's the impact. Dave, how do you think about that?
The idea of like being marketers but not marketing our marketing is, I think, something we all suffer from. Like, we're operational, we're getting the thing done, but we don't necessarily want to tell people about it, or that's the last thing we do. So I had a leader who would always just say, look, you have to market your marketing. And I think on the front end, it's coming to a contract with your product person or your product leader around, this is what the role is. So going on a roadshow, having a deck, like getting their understanding of expectations and being willing to kind of suit the needs of that person, at least early on. So building that trust, and then kind of over time, shifting to what you think is more important for the business. But if you're not communicating your successes, even if you're delivering on those key metrics, it's hard for people to see the value and want to work with you or trust you to kind of go on that journey with them.
Yeah, that's true. No good if no one else knows what the success has been. Anything to add, Sam?
Not much to add. I'd just say invest in fewer, bigger initiatives. As an IC, it's like as a PMM, you can spread yourself too thin easily and become a support function in person for other initiatives, and choose fewer things. And like Christiana said, like, what's that flagship project you're going to invest in? That's probably the best way to focus your time to show what you can do.
Yeah, totally. Just focus, not spread yourself too thin. Okay, our next top voted one is, what's your approach to maintaining alignment with product and sales teams during complex product launches? I know we've touched on building relationships a lot already, but yeah, Sam, do you want to kick us off with that one?
Yeah, I think boring answer maybe, but it's all about good documentation and setting up the right rituals upfront. The biggest challenge for PMMs, like it's really easy to end up with like a 30-page or like 27 slide go-to-market plan, and that's when you tend to see people not fully grok what you're trying to do, and then 3 weeks before the launch, there's tons of feedback on the social assets and the sales materials, and it turns out that wasn't the right kind of like collateral for it. The best kind of early docs are under 5 slides, under a page and a half, and opinionated and really clear. And that's when you want to kind of build that ritual of a go-to-market kickoff with all the relevant cross-functional teams, hash it out, ask provocative questions, have a dedicated part of the agenda where you ask people to challenge things and say, a pre-mortem of, what could go wrong, what are you worried about? If you've done that like 2 months before a launch ritual, well, usually it's pretty smooth sailing from there. And then it's make sure you keep people updated on what you're doing, and a good PMM is a master of Slack and your whatever Microsoft Teams, whatever you guys use, and just make sure there's no surprises, everyone knows what you're doing. Overinvest in upfront alignment.
I love that on the brevity. It takes a lot of self-discipline to like get down to that 5 slides or 1 page or whatever it might be.
You always hear where like a product person complains about something in the product marketing plan a week before, and you're like, well, I told you in slide 23 in that initial deck, and you signed off on that deck, and that's not really fair.
Yeah, that's true. Christiana?
I don't have a lot to add. I think that's spot on. I think it's just frequent communication and maybe across mediums, I think is spot on. And then I think just making folks feel like they're heard and that you follow through. So I think those for me are the 3 ingredients.
Yeah. And how about you, Dave?
I think in any relationship, it's really easy to walk out of a conversation thinking you have alignment, but don't. That's probably true in personal life and professional. And so a lot of what we like to do is just putting the things that we want to stress test on a slide as part of those regular syncs, and putting in front of product or putting in front of sales and saying, this is what we heard, or we filled in these blanks. Is that right? Is that not right? And just getting that live sign off for those really tricky questions, because they inevitably come up, is just really helpful. So it's being that really good kind of meeting organizer, having a clear agenda, sending out the recap, and then there's truly like no question marks around what was agreed on in that conversation.
Yeah, that making sure you actually have the alignment, not just assuming, is so important. Okay, I think we have time for like one or two more maybe. So next one, this is probably kicked off by something you said, Sam, about brand marketers. What's the main distinction between brand marketing and product marketing? Do you want to go first?
It's a great question. And honestly, before my role at Spotify before I was leading the full marketing team was brand and product marketing together, because to me that's what makes the most sense. When I was at Twitter, we had really separate product marketing and brand marketing, and what you ended up having was the brand marketing team made a big partnership with the NBA. Then, they spent all this money, and the idea with the NBA was to put all these, product signals in NBA games and hashtag and live video and vines. And they wanted to use the product in really smart ways using the NBA to kind of show what Twitter could do. And then the product marketing side, I was working on our video products at the time, Vine and Periscope and Twitter native video. And the number one thing we want to do was show that it's part of culture. So we're thinking about things like the NBA and, oh, the best go-to-market would be to do it around the NBA finals and, have the best videos on the top of the product. You kind of naturally converge. So they work really well together. I think the key difference is product marketing always needs to have one foot in with the product team and often might sit in the product org. And they're that bridge, that translator. And so, the best product marketers can have their PM hat on and a brand marketer hat on, and they're going to be in all the product meetings. They're going to influence the product roadmap. They're going to help on research. They're going to help on competitive positioning. They're going to be like, the key partner in that brand marketing brief. And then brand marketing might specialize in things like, creative execution, experiential, paid media, sponsorship, and help really think about that bigger brand story. But if you're not working hand in hand, product and brand, that's quite inefficient, and you're really kind of hampering the impact you can have. Because yeah, really they should be two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The connection between them is so important. Dave, how do you think about brand and PMM at Twilio?
I agree. There's lots of value in them being connected. Sometimes you're speaking to different audiences with a brand campaign versus the product campaign. And so having a clear understanding of the corporate story and what we're trying to convey to maybe an executive level or someone who's just kind of seeing the brand campaign, but maybe not every piece that's coming along with every product launch or every product in the portfolio. So thinking about how those connect, how does the CEO actually engage with your product manager or your line of business audience? And so a lot of it comes down to like who are you speaking to really with those? But yeah, I think Sam summed it up great.
Yeah, that's a great point. I always loved working with the brand team because they get to do like fun things, like big creative campaigns. But yeah, not always the same goals as some of the product marketing work. How about you, Christiana?
I can just answer from the B2B context, because even though I think this is a B2C rooted question, but I would say, we ask about 3 whys, I think, within product marketing. So the why change, why now, and then why Dropbox, for example. And I really think that brand really focuses on the why change, right? And why a decision has to be made at like a category level. Whereas I think product marketing, as we operate, I think further down the funnel will support that message, of course, and help think about the major like market drivers, but are more focused on really on like the why now. So what's the cost of doing nothing? And the second one is like why Dropbox, or why enter your brand here. And that's where I think the differentiation piece matters so much. So that's for me the delineation.
Yeah, makes sense. It'd be different in B2B and B2C too. Okay, we have time for one more quick one. It's a little bit of a spicy question. So, what was your worst career experience and what did you learn? Sam, I can see you're laughing, so I'm gonna pick on you first.
Gotta be careful laughing. I mean, I alluded to it earlier about the importance of managers, and I've definitely experienced that myself, especially when you have like manager change at a previous company. You have one manager who brings you in, and then when it switches and there's someone new, you don't quite click or you see your role differently. That's definitely been the hardest times of my career. often you can end up with a new manager and it works out great. But it's much more, when you're choosing a job, you kind of can select for the manager and you're both vetting each other to make sure it clicks beforehand. When it happens, when you're already at a job, that's when, hopefully you get lucky, and that's happened to me a bunch in my career. And then a few times I've gotten unlucky, and that's where I've kind of learned sometimes it's like, just seek out a manager relationship that works, and put in your best efforts to fix it. And when it doesn't click, and that's okay. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I know, tricky to talk about life, but yeah, if you don't get to control who your manager is, it can be hard. Christiana, how about you?
One of them, the ones that stands out was at WeWork. I was acquired in through a technology company. So we were part of the technology portfolio, and I ran marketing for their full technology portfolio. And we were really trying to embed the technology sale into the real estate sale. And to give you all a sense of like the relative revenue, it was like pennies. Now it was like higher margin, and like it contributed to like higher multiples for their fundraising story. But as we try to like basically validate the packaging and get it through the sales team, I remember we presented to the chief product officer and the chief revenue officer. And I remember the chief product officer, and the product I'm talking about is not like a software product. He's a chief product officer for like a real estate portfolio, right? So like what different types of spaces. And I remember he like we were all sitting, and he like, I was there with the person I was working on this project with, came up like right up, like we're standing, pitch me, go ahead, pitch me. And it was just like so abrupt. And I think just because I know the question asked for learnings, I think one of the learnings, and we were ready to pitch, but I think one of the learnings was like, oh, I think we could have done a better job. And like, there was a lot of big wigs with like big personalities. I think we could have done a little more one-off like meetings to like get the buy-in ahead of that meeting. And I think that learning actually proves to be very valuable day to day now, which is like, if you're going to go into a meeting with a bunch of like important opinionated people, doing a little shopping and laying the groundwork with some of those people before, so you make them secret allies, I think is super, super strong learning. So do a little bit of diligence, build those relationships, preview, make sure they feel heard, and then they won't blow it up for you in that meeting.
Yeah, love that. Try and get ahead of the unexpected. And lastly, Dave.
Yeah, I'll take it a little bit differently. Early on, I owned our marketing automation platform, had no experience or right to do that, and sent an email to the wrong 2 million people. And like just wrong arrow connected. And it was probably the worst day of my life in that moment. I think anyone who's worked on email automation is familiar with that feeling. But I actually had a manager who was like, okay, like, great, like we'll move on, we'll figure this out, we'll send it to the right list. And so it was a really low point in my career in terms of making a mistake, but it's a good reminder to slow down. Like we're not brain surgeons, nothing we're doing is like the most critical thing in the context of the greater world or even the company. And so like taking the time to slow down, but also giving yourself grace when you mess up is always important to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that fear of pressing the button. Well, thank you all for your